What do you remember about that day?
I was working at the Mission School District at the time.
I was interning at Disney World.
In homeroom, I was doing the announcements for our little closed circuit television channel.
Well, to start, I should tell you, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, so it hit home for a lot of us. And I was actually an undergrad at the time. I was a senior, and I remember some of my suite mates coming to get me and say, hey, something happened at the World Trade Center. Now, there was a World Trade Center bombing a few years prior to that, and it really wasn't anything major. I mean, it was, but it wasn't what it was on 9/11. And I was thinking, something like that, another issue like that. Probably not that big. Maybe there was a bombing in the lobby or something. And when I got there and saw what had happened, I didn't believe it was real. It didn't seem like it was something that could ever happen. It didn't hit me. Now, the first thing I did when I saw that there was also an attack at the Pentagon was I called my parents to make sure they weren't anywhere near the Pentagon. And they weren't. They were fine. They were telling me they were okay. And I just spent the rest of the day in disbelief. It was a kick to the gut. I just didn't know what was happening, and I kept calling my parents, and they kept guiding me through it. I woke up the next day and found out it was very real. It was not a nightmare. It was something that had happened. And I think a lot of us were in shock, but a lot of us were very angry about what had happened on 9/11. We knew that there was a possibility of something like that happening. We always heard when we were growing up during the Cold War that the Soviet Union could bomb us. But when it happened, I mean, it was so jarring. It was hard to even put into words. Still hard to put into words today. Now, years later, I got to talking to some of my colleagues in the business who actually covered it. And I'll never forget their stories of what it was like after 9/11 had happened, because they say they were just walking around Manhattan, and it was just like this, you probably remember, like this gray, brown, yellow cloud of smoke. They say you'll never forget the smell. It was the worst smell ever. It was a smell your body couldn't even comprehend. And it's quiet and it's loud all at once, and there's things coming at you. And people were coming up to them with pictures and saying, have you seen this person? Have you seen this person? And they would say, no, we haven't. And then they'd say, well, can you get video of me holding up this picture of this person so I can ask your viewers? And so they'd grab video of it. I don't know if the video ever aired, but it was so chaotic in the news business that people don't even remember what happened. It was just so crazy. And the haunting memories, you never forget. Just like the saying, you never forget. That's all there really is to it.
I grew up in Michigan, so no direct connection to the World Trade Center. I hadn't even visited New York City by that point in my life, but it really altered the trajectory of what I would do going forward and what direction my life would take ultimately. I'll never forget, I was in homeroom. I was doing the announcements for our little closed circuit television channel. TV 62 is what we called it at my high school. And I walk out of TV 62 after doing the announcements, and I look at the TV screen that's there in the library, and it's not on TV 62. It's on the news. A special report. The second tower had just been hit, or the first tower had just been hit. The second tower was getting hit, and I'll never forget it, because in that moment, I'd already, for years, kind of thought like maybe the military was going to be my path. Kind of give back to the country, and that moment really solidified it for me. I kind of knew then for the next 3 years what was going to be next for me after high school, but I had no clue the impact it would have on everything that I did for 10 years. Everything from deploying to the Middle East to the very last assignment I had at the District of Columbia Air National Guard, which was a unit that was stood up and created specifically after 9/11, and our job there was to protect the National Capital Region, and that job impacted me just as every other job I had in the Air Force so much and so greatly, and it truly molded me into the person I am today. And it's just always, it's just wild to think about that moment in 2001 would just kind of shape not just my future, but the future of millions of people, millions of Americans, not just in the military, but overall as a whole. Nothing's been the same since. Whether it's, crossing back and forth to Matamoros, not as free as we can do it, all the way to having to take our shoes off at the airport. So it's something that it may be difficult for people who weren't around or maybe very young to understand the impact it had, but you're living it. You're living we'll never live the way we did pre 9/11. And a lot of young folks will never know what life was like before that.
So I was interning at Disney World, and I had just gotten off working the night shift, so I was really tired. I used to fall asleep with the radio on, so everything that I experienced was through the radio. I remember hearing the DJs for their morning show. They came on at 6 in the morning. At the time it was 6 in the morning, 5 o'clock here, and they were laughing, joking. It was a regular morning show. And then by the time it was 7 o'clock, their tone had changed. And since they had a TV inside their studio, they were just talking about what was going on. So throughout the few hours that we were being attacked and what they were learning from the news outlets, they were also repeating it through the airwaves. So it wasn't until the first tower hit and came down, that's when one of my roommates, we were 6 in an apartment. One of them came to me, we were really close, and she knocked on my door and she's like, "Yolette, have you heard the news?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm listening to it. I've been listening to it this entire time, just I haven't left." And she was pretty scared, so I went with her to the living room and we all just hung around the TV, started watching it as it was all unfolding. After both towers were destroyed, one by one we all tried to get a hold of our families. Some of us were able to get through right away. Some of us had a really hard time. I was one of them that couldn't get a hold of my family until 6:30, which was 5 o'clock here. I had called everybody that I knew. Everybody at the time, their cell phones weren't in. They weren't as popular. I didn't have a cell phone. I used to use a landline all the time. And I had everybody's phone numbers written down. Called every single family member that I knew, every single friend that I had phone numbers I had memorized. The lines were always busy. So when I finally got a hold of somebody, the phone rang maybe about 5 times, and it was one of my aunts, my grandma's little sister, who I was very close with. She picked up the phone and she said hello, and I said, "Oh my God, was I able to get through?" And she's like, "Letita?" And I said, "Oh my God, I got through, I finally got through." So she was relieved when she finally heard my voice, because they had been trying to call me all day and they couldn't get through either. So that was just a relief, and I told her, like, "Can you please call my parents and let them know?" Because I had even tried calling them at work and I couldn't get through. So it was kind of a relief. So later on, as the night continued, I was able to call my grandma. Then I got a hold of my parents, talked to them, and yeah, it was very scary. But I also remember that working at Disney World, the company just wanted to continue to, like, as if nothing was, like if it was a regular day. A lot of people called in just to shut down the parks because they were afraid. They had heard rumors that one of the planes was going to hit the parks. So they had closed the parks, but I was working at a resort, so those were still open. But yeah, everybody was scared. I remember Orlando, or Kissimmee actually, because that's where I lived. it was a very busy city, and during that time, that entire day, I could walk through the street, a very busy street, and there was no cars. So everybody was scared. I remember that. I just tried to stay calm and calm everybody that I was hanging out with, my friends, my roommates. So yeah.
I was working at the Mission School District at the time, at central office there, and it was pretty much a normal morning. And then word very quickly started to spread about a plane hitting one of the World Trade Center towers. And immediately everyone was starting to go online, turn on the TVs to see what was going on. And everyone was really transfixed at the time. And then as the word came in that the second tower was hit and the other planes that were involved as well, and things really began to sink in that this was all kind of a planned attack, everyone was just really kind of glued to the TVs at that point. And then when the first tower came down, it was like it's hard to explain, almost like a piece of me inside kind of died along with what was going on. It was heartbreaking. It was scary at the same time, because knowing how many people could have been in the towers at the time, and not really knowing the full scope of what was going on. There was a lot of fear, a lot of unknowns, and later in the day having to share that kind of news with a meeting of principals, because you're still trying to hold your workday together while still trying to process a major tragedy, was rough, and everyone was really kind of leaning on each other through that whole time, trying to understand fully just what was going on and trying to figure out how were we supposed to feel.